Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Sturman. I'll be your host today. I'm a producer with Promethean Action, joined with the lovely Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. This is the third episode of our weekly question and answer show, and we thank you for being here today. So everyone in the chat, while the stream warms up, let me know where you're from. We already have some people here. We have some greetings from Southern California, British Columbia, Czech Republic, Orange Beach, Alabama. Hello, Patty. Thank you for being here. Raymer, Alabama, Yahoo Cummings, Super Yoda 99. I see you. Indiana, Belgium, Albany, West Australia. Cool. We have an Albany, New York, too. Hi from Southwest Florida. Thank you, David. Greetings from Arkansas. Archaeist, hello. Fort Worth, Alberta. Greetings from UK, Texas, Scotland, Denver, Colorado. Great. Looks like both of our streams are going well. All right, so over the last week, we collected over 50 questions from across the world. We're going to take about 40 of them today. And just a reminder, these questions come from our newsletter subscribers. If you want to ask a question, please join our free newsletter. I'm going to put that banner down here at the bottom. Okay. Yes. So if you're new here, we have a newsletter. We do 3 political briefings a week plus this one live show. And if you want to stay in touch with us, please go to prom.ac or just search the web for Promethean Action and become a free subscriber. And over the next few emails, I'll put the link in our newsletter emails for you to ask a question. So that's how people are getting their questions in today. Washington State, Connecticut. Thank you for all of our California supporters. We really appreciate it. It's a shame California is still such a leftist state. Hopefully we can change that one day. Hello from the Netherlands. Welcome. Okay. So why don't we just get started here? I'm going to take 4 questions as a group. It's going to be questions surrounding the British Empire, which we obviously get a lot of. All right. So let me pull it up here. Our first question. Okay. First question is from Harold. Who are these royal families and what do they believe about themselves that gives them the right to enslave the rest of humanity? Thank you, Harold. And let's get to the next one. I want to know exactly who is running the world. Those who cannot be named yet make decisions on how all of us live or behave. Thank you, Tom. Who is currently the Lord Mayor of the City of London? Are they one of the bloodline families? And the 4th question we're going to take as a group here. What God do you think these people serve, if any?
Susan, you want to start or you want me to?
One's yours.
Okay, all right. I'll start with the Lord Mayor of London because I think that illustrates a kind of a fundamental fallacy that people have about this, which is what's the relationship between the royals and what we see on the ground in terms of economic activity, all right? And that has evolved over time. The Lord Mayor of the City of London is Alistair King at this point. The City of London has never been governed specifically by the royals. Instead, they have this entire system of emerging upwards, all the people being picked, schooled at the right schools, adopting belief systems which are appropriate, and then coming through a whole system within the corporation, which is the City of London itself. First, they have to be an alderman. Believe it or not, there's all sorts of divisions within the City of London. Then they have to be the sheriff, and then they emerge by election within this elite financier grouping to become the Lord Mayor of the city itself. So what you're talking about here is an evolution of an empire system. Basically, the British Empire chose to look at two particular empires as models. The Roman Empire, which you see in the famous book by Gibbons called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and the Venetian system, where the doges, or so-called elites, actually govern through a variety of means. And the royals essentially fit into this as giving overall legitimacy and a veneer of actual hereditary wealth and order, if you will, to this otherwise primarily financier scheme of empire. And that's kind of has been the relationship over a long period of time, is constant back and forth between the royals and their institutions and the financing of them. And you see the relationship very clearly in the relationship between the British royal family, who comes and is designated as the sovereign and have their own institutions and financing through the City of London. But if you asked me, what's the primary place where decisions are made, the royals kind of serve as the topping on the meal, if you will, which is a whole system of financier-driven and monetarist-driven debt slavery, which has been the characteristic of this empire all along and empires throughout history. You really can't get this from the internet. And a lot of people fall into a trap of actually thinking that, all of these various theories which are floated on the internet is the quick answer to actually describing this. You have to read a bit, and you have to study a bit, and you have to learn really what the ideas are behind, the question is asked, what gives them the ability to rule, or what gives them the right to say this? Well, basically, it's us, we citizens, giving up our inherent right to be citizens and letting them get away with it, so to speak, and not raising ourselves up to the level of competence. As basically Abe Lincoln basically said, government of the people, by the people, and for the people is what in some way distinguishes us from them, which is government of the few, or the oligarchs, and a system of power distribution, which is really what it is, that they use to control things. So I made a little list of just fundamental works which people can go to. If you pull up the second slide, Adam, I'll actually just give that a second and third sides. Two people have written, who are associated with us, have written very good descriptions and books about the history of these empires and how they actually operate in the world. The first is by Robert Ingraham. It's called The Modern Anglo-Dutch Empire. That's available on Amazon. And I've given you the links, so the links will be in the description. Will Wertz wrote a whole book called Beware the British East India Company, which points out that the real power lies with these private type of entities, not what most people think of as government. And that's a really fundamental conception to get across. The third is a very important book by Carroll Quigley called The Anglo-American Establishment. Now, Quigley was a historian. He taught at Georgetown for a number of years. He wrote that book and another very famous book called Tragedy and Hope. And to show you what that's about, he was given access as a history student to all the documents and all the correspondence which actually existed for what one might call the modern British financial empire, starting with the beginnings of the Round Table movement in Britain and in the United States. He got into the actual ways that these people thought, what they said, and what they developed between each other. And it tells you a story which continued in the United States from the time he describes. His book ends in 1964 or so. Forward, you see the same kinds of forces. Now, to show you why he's so controversial, What happened when he did Tragedy and Hope and actually described the beginnings of the modern British Empire in it, J.P. Morgan bought up all of the rights to the book and bought up all of the plates and prevented it from being published in its full form. It just excised all the meat out of the book for years. And they wouldn't even give Quigley back the plates to the book, which back in that day, there was no internet. And the plates were how you actually preserved your copy. So this is a very important book, and it's a bit tedious, but nonetheless, it actually goes through and gets you thinking about who are these guys and why did they think they had, basically the ability to rule the world? What gave them the right to do that? Why did they think that? Which is not something people really get into or understand very well. And finally, there are a lot of questions which we're going to be taking here, about Israel a little bit later on in the discussion, and also about the nature of the differences between our world, which is the Trump world, which is the American system, and this imperial world of monetarist value of everything. Underlying it, of course, are two basic distinctions about who are we in this world? What is the nature of mankind? What is the nature of man? Obviously, what the British Empire believes is men and women are beasts and governed solely by their, impulses. The American system believes that men and women are made in the image of God and actually participate actively in his creation. The great German historian Friedrich Schiller wrote a book about the difference between these two types of visions of mankind, a little piece called Friedrich Schiller, The Legislation of Lycurgus and Solon in Ancient Greece. That was very influential on our founding fathers. And basically what he describes under the realm of Lycurgus is the state of Sparta, which was a military imperial type of state, versus the Greeks under Solon, which was essentially, as he describes Solon, the lawgiver who gave the people a form of government which could be self-sustaining because it was based on exactly that notion of man. We're not beasts. We participate in God's creation. So I wanted to give people a little bit of a sense of that because it's really important as we emerge as the government now, that we actually raise our level up to the level of thinking where we can actually win this fight. Adam, you're muted.
Thank you, Barbara. Let's get to the next question here. Okay, what is the relationship between the World Economic Forum and the British banking intelligence community? Thank you, Arthur, for your question.
Well, I'll take a crack at that. First, I'm going to share the screen. And for some reason, I can't get it up. There we go. Okay. This is the founding conference of the World Economic Forum. And obviously, as picking up on the parlance of what Barbara said, there's a lot of connectos. You could list people and individuals and institutions. The British royal family has been very much involved. Prince Philip was very much involved in the World Economic Forum. Prince Charles was at the infamous Great Reset conference and so on. But to really understand, I think, the important relationship, I want you to take a look at the date in the middle of the screen there, which is the year that the World Economic Forum was founded, namely 1971. It was founded earlier in the year in 1971. Now, tomorrow is a very important day in terms of the immediate circumstances, and that is the hoped-for summit between Presidents Trump and Putin. But it also happens to be the anniversary, August 15th, of the day that Richard Nixon took the dollar off the gold reserve standard, very much under pressure from the economic policies of the City of London. So just stop and think about it, because I think really the way to understand things like the World Economic Forum or other groups that Barbara will probably discuss a little later, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, is you have to locate them is as instruments in the hands of people who have a goal and an ideology. And it's the goal and the ideology which is much more important than the institutions themselves. So again, think about the timing of this. The British financier elite, the City of London, with their Wall Street friends, were very much planning this attack, had been planning the attack on the Bretton Woods system, which was established in the post-war period for decades and decades. I would submit that the founding of the World Economic Forum in 1971 was part of the preparation for reshaping the world much more back in the image of this British private banking system. Because what was the significance of Bretton Woods? It had been spun up after World War II, and there was a fight between the American outlook of Bretton Woods, which was represented by Harry Dexter White, and we do have an article on this on our Promethean Action webpage, homepage, and John Maynard Keynes, Lord John Maynard Keynes, representing the British outlook. The American outlook more or less won, I say more or less, won with the founding of Bretton Woods, because the basic principle of Bretton Woods was that the purpose of money was to foster economic development and production. That's the importance of having fixed exchange rates. That's the importance of tying your currency to a gold reserve standard. In other words, you want to tether the issuance of money or credit to actual productive activity, but it's the productive activity that dominates. And that more or less, again, you're in a world that has central banks, so it wasn't perfect, but it was the United States essentially saying, we want the world run from the standpoint of actual economic production. And with taking the dollar off the gold reserve standard in 1971, that was broken. And it was the first in a series of steps where everything was financialized, where the purpose of economy was no longer to produce things, to better the standard of living of everybody in the world through increasing the pie. The purpose of the World Economic Forum and other institutions that were spun up in a similar period, I think the trilaterals were 1974, was how do we manage populations as we shrink the pie? And I think that's how you have to look at connections. You know, you can do Venn diagrams, who's in this group, who's in that group, who's in this group, and then see who's in all those groups. And if you think that's going to give you the heart of how the enemy operates, you're going to miss a lot, because it is a question of what is their intention, what is their policy. And I think what Barbara just said in terms of Schiller's work on the difference between an oligarchical society, a militaristic oligarchical society, which was Sparta, and a society which was trying to organize itself from the standpoint of universal principles, which is what our American Republic established in the form of a government for the first time, is really the only way to answer these questions. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Susan.
Before we move on, I forgot. I've got a great slide. I got to share it.
Okay, you can share it, please.
Which is sort of when our organization, which has now become Promethean Action, began to really get its legs, because it was in the wake of Richard Nixon pulling the plug on the gold reserve standard. And in fact, I can tell you, I joined this organization the morning of August 16th, because I saw what Nixon had just done and knew that Lyndon LaRouche, who was shaping this organization, who had founded this organization, had a concept that this is where we were headed before it happened, and saw the consequences of it. Namely, we would go toward fascism afterwards. So the screen I want to share is our earlier newspaper coverage, when we used to do newspapers, of the consequences of Nixon's policy. Nixon pulls the plug. And we outlined to people why it happened and warned that it was heading toward fascism, which very few people saw in 1971. But if you look at how close we came with the coup against President Trump, with the information warfare, the censorship, the deep state, and so on. Think about what it meant for somebody in 1971 to see something as arcane, as taking the, seemingly arcane, as taking the dollar off the gold reserve standard and saying, if we don't stop where this is going, it's going to end up in fascism. Fortunately, he saw that. He created a movement which understood the principles by which he saw that. And that's why we are what we are today. So.
Thank you, Susan. Before we continue here, I just want to do a quick shout out to Larry. Larry says, my God, I've been educated so much watching your videos as a 65-year-old man. I never knew any of this. What an education I've been getting. Thank you. Thank you very much, Larry, for the super chat. And we also got another friend, Ron Mays 71. Thank you very much, Ron Mays. Okay, we're going to head to the next question here. What are your observations of Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury? I read that he is a friend of King Charles and was a Soros protege. He did actually work for Soros. So who would like to take this question?
Let me just, I'll jump in here. This is really illustrative of what you got to take into account, which is called people change. All right. And Scott Bessent was a friend of, and is a friend of King Charles. He is or was working for George Soros, and in fact is often given credit for Soros's master move in crashing the British pound. But at the same time, you know, Donald Trump asked him to come in. He taught a long course on Bretton Woods at the college level. He's clearly understands the difference between the world he lived in, which is the stock market monetarist world, and the world of real production. And he came out and looked at it and said, oh my goodness, we're crushing half the country with this absolute divide between Wall Street and Main Street, which is how he conceptualizes the thing which we've been talking about for years, that we've lost the productive economy. All right, so he is all those things which you can connect and you can say, is that fatal? No, he's obviously changed. Now, Donald Trump came in and he asked him, Scott, how do I actually get the debt paid down without crashing the entire economy? Which is a question at this point, which is very real because of the situation we actually face. You got to figure out a way to rein in Wall Street, to rein in this kind of predatory financial system, at the same time as you take their money and begin to deploy it to actually reigniting the productive capacity of the country. And that's exactly what I think he's doing. Is he doing everything perfectly? You know, some of us would, in our, you know, back chair, armchair kind of, you know, saying you should do this or you should do that. It's kind of silly because we don't, the measurement is going to come from whether the economy actually grows productively or not. And right now, I'm saying that it's growing productively. We're going in all the right directions. The reason why people have trouble with it and don't feel like they see it right away is they're used to that stock market, you know, crazy thing that goes on in your head and you hear ding, 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 that bell every day. And if that's your measurement, you're going to say, oh, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. It's like being in a casino, which is not accidental. Now, think about, instead, what do I see in terms of our energy sources? Oh my goodness, we're building nuclear power plants again. What do I see in terms of building ships? Oh my goodness, we're building ships again. What do I see in terms of the automobile industry? Well, okay, we're changing from, you know, electric cars back to something we can market and build well. What do I see in terms of infrastructure? Well, we're beginning to actually get rid of all of the crazy regulatory things which keep things from being built. That's opening up the productive economy again, and that's exactly what you want to see. the exact mechanisms by which you're doing this, they're basically, tied into not allowing a market crash, which the Wall Street people might very well like to do to stop all this. They're into managing their nonsense at the same time as you're actually building the economy. Susan has described it as a dual power situation. I think that's a pretty accurate way of looking at it. She may want to add something.
Well, I would just add, never in my lifetime have I heard a Treasury Secretary celebrate the fact that blue-collar wages have had their biggest increase in 60 years under this president. Just listen to him. Watch him in combat with the idiot talking heads who represent Wall Street while he holds his ground in terms of the fact that this is a manufacturing renaissance, the fact that we are reshaping the economy to support the working people, the middle class in this country, and so on. So, again, rather than drawing some connecto lines, watch him in action. Now, if he drops the ball and at some point does something terrible and Wall Street-like, yeah, you can then attack him. But I haven't seen anything that he has done substantively since he's come in, which is anything other than being a vital part of Donald Trump's full-on challenge to the control of this global financier elite.
Thank you, Susan. If you're just joining us, my name is Adam Sturman. I am a producer here with Promethean Action, joined by Susan Kokinda of Promethean Action and Barbara Boyd of Promethean PAC. We do this every Thursday. We take your questions mainly from our newsletter subscribers. I just want to say something really quick. Jeff's question, why are you also not on Rumble? I do hear you. It's a question of manpower. I need people that can competently moderate the chat. So we are working on that. And in the future, I do plan on simultaneously streaming this to Rumble. I also want to give a quick shout out to Star Observers. She says, most grateful. Thank you, Star Observers, for the support. Make sure you get our free newsletter. The link for the free newsletter is in the description, everyone. So you can get our free newsletter there. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. We got to pick it up here a little bit. We just got plenty to go. Okay, next question. Is it only the British Empire that is trying to keep the USA in a subservient relationship? Or are there other empires that are involved in the same effort, such as Spain, Portugal, France, Japan, and China? Thanks for all the education you provide us. Thank you very much, Mark.
I'll take the first shot at that. Empire is an idea. It's not a geographical location. It may plots itself, in the city of London for a couple of 100 years. Have there been imperial leaders? All the countries that you mentioned, Spain, Portugal, France, Japan, China, at one point been under the grip of some imperial ideology, in many cases in the modern period, spawned out of Britain, although there certainly are ancient empires. Yes, there have. Obviously, at the time of the founding of the United States, the Spanish and the Portuguese, were essentially a sub-empire of the British. But I think the important thing is it's the ideology. And that ideology is like a disease, which sometimes is infecting this country and sometimes is infecting this leader or that faction. So it's the disease that we have to wipe out. And this goes very much to the heart of something we often get in the comments, where people from the United Kingdom say, it's not the British, i.e., it's not us, the people. No, it's not you, the people, but it's an imperial ideology, which again has sort of squatted in Britain for many, many centuries.
Would you like to add anything, Barbara?
No, let's jump forward.
Okay, no worries. Okay, here's one from Max. As an Englishman, and we get so many questions from the UK. Thank you, everyone. As an Englishman, I would love to hear your take on your thesis, on how your thesis relates to the British and Swedish monarchy's seeming turn on its own people regarding mass immigration and support of Islam. What are they doing?
They're doing what they always do, which is to subjugate their own people. Basically what you have going on is, mass immigration to, create the basis for the lowest living wage possible in the population. And both Muslims, we have it the same thing here, and everybody else imported at lower wages is the victim of what is essentially a modern slave trade. And I'll just leave it at that, basically the difference that we cited between the American system and the British system primarily relates to how you treat the labor force. In the American system, you're constantly trying to raise the standard of living and raise the educational level of your labor force to raise productivity and creativity in your labor force, because after all, we're supposed to be participating in God's creation. If you think of people as beasts, then basically what you're trying to do is get them to take the lowest wage possible and give you the greatest profit possible as an overlord. And I think that's a pretty good description of what's going on there.
Okay. Yeah, I think also what's being done is just, this is part of what globalism was supposed to be. No borders, one world language, homogenized culture. It's basically the same culture in the world. So I think that also plays a large part of it. As our globalist system is dying, they're going to do incredibly more crazy things in order to try and keep it going, unfortunately. Okay. Next question. All right, this is a little bit longer one. Satan and his world order is the anti-God, anti-life, anti-fatherhood, anti-family, okay? Father is not just being a good male family at the home, but instead father is the absolute unalienable right and responsibility to provide for and protect the family as our Heavenly Father does. And may I suggest that as a beginning, family is the only human institution ordained by our Maker and Redeemer, is in Genesis 2:22, and the core building block of every culture from the beginning of time. That's absolutely true. Family has been the core building block since the beginning of time. Therefore, amid all other objections, how do or should the policies and measures advocated by Promethean Action also leverage the robust family back into today's social dynamic? Robert, this is a very important question for today.
Yeah,
Barbara,
I'm really glad Robert asked this, because I'm going to answer it by taking you back to the city of Detroit in 1960, when Detroit had the highest per capita and family income of any city in the country. Now, Detroit, is not a mecca for finance. It's not a mecca for gambling casinos. At least it wasn't in 1960. It's not a mecca for, Hollywood productions. It was a place where, because you had stable, good-paying manufacturing jobs, one income could comfortably raise a family. And I would say that the foundation of all of this, everything that you say is right, but unless you actually have an economic policy which supports family formation, in which one income can raise a family. Now, it may be the case that the family decides that they want to have two parents going to work, but that's by choice, not by the economic necessity today, where you've got to paste together 4.5 different jobs among who knows how many members of the family in order to not make ends meet, not be able to make your car payments, not be able to ever see the possibility of owning a home, which is something that young people are acutely facing at this point. So there is the moral question, which is obvious, but I think the foundation of it is the economic question. And that gets, again, back to the point that we're going to keep hammering away at. Economics is fundamentally moral. It should not be about money. It's about, are you increasing the ability of your society to produce human beings, and families are absolutely central to this, who are creative, productive, and can move their society forward. You have to have an economic context in order to do that. And that is precisely what the American system was. As Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor said, as Alexander Hamilton, our first Treasury Secretary, said, the wealth of a nation is the productive powers of labor. And by which he meant, this is where wealth comes from. It comes from man's mind. So I think that has to be the first step, because before you saw the social attack on the family, which obviously has reached fever pitch in recent years and decades, before you saw the social and propaganda attack on the family, you saw the economic attack on the family by taking down these jobs.
Barbara, would you like to say anything?
No, I think she's covered the gist of it. I would just add basically that, you know, the elites have had a policy of zero population growth and Malthusianism as their governing ideology over the entire period since 1971. And that has spawned all of these crazy things we see of no father, men are bad, and no childbearing, you can't afford it ever, and kids are bad, and they keep women out of the workforce, et cetera, et cetera. It's all part and parcel of this idea that if you have too many people, we can't govern you as we want to do. And that's basically how they even said it. You know, we don't want these people around because it makes things too messy from the standpoint of controlling you. So I'll just leave it at.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to take just a few super chats here that came in. One from John. Thank you for your insights and patriotism. Do you think Comey will be held accountable? I fear he will walk due to his being able to blackmail so many people. You want to say something on that real quick?
I don't think he's walking. I see a very serious, you know, continuing attack at this point on the entire coup, on which the revelations around Jim Comey are substantial. And I think people, you know, from everything I'm hearing and from everything a lot of people I trust are hearing, this is a serious prosecution and it's going to go forward. So people are very aware of how impatient everybody is out there to see handcuffs on certain people. All right. And I will tell you that it takes a while to put together the case, but they're launching the public offensive, which is very clear, to make it clear to people what the basis of these charges actually is. So no, I think there's going to be substantial consequences.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And let me just take this other one here real quick. Annie Seaside, can reform save England? What odds would you guess? Short of a Trump, can the UK be saved? I think the answer is yes.
I mean, we do get that question a lot. I think there's a question perhaps toward the end of the chat, which asks the same thing. You know, it really is a question of educating the population. I mean, it's going to be two things. It's going to be from the outside. You've got to have, I think you're going to have to break the control of the British-based central banking system from the outside, you know, which includes a combination of forces, the United States, Russia, China, India, the four-power arrangement that Mr. LaRouche often talked about. So I think you're going to kind of have to shatter control from there, all the while that the people of various enslaved countries, i.e. under monarchs, are educating their population in terms of what are Republican principles, with a small r, and how do you run an economy based on the American system. I think both of those two things have to go on simultaneously.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's pick up the pace a little bit. It's 11:40. We'll try not to go for 2 hours, but we're about a third of the way done. So let's move to the next question. Okay, do you think that King Charles' comments on politics helps or hinders the controlling families, such as the Rockefellers and Goldsmiths? Thank you, Sandra.
That's basically the same question I think that we've addressed before. Do I think that the controlling families are the Rockefellers and Goldsmiths at this point? I'm not sure. They certainly played a significant role in the structure of the modern British financial empire. And, basically Quigley goes into that in some depth concerning the Rockefellers and the Morgan interests in the United States and their control, up to and including 1963-64. The Rockefellers, of course, is the Trilateral Commission. And I think we'll get to that question a little bit later on. Do I think King Charles's comments on politics helps or hinders? I think King Charles has one proposition in mind, which is this zero growth business, which we've actually talked about. And he's been the key guy in all of that. And that's been a consensus of the worldwide elite since 1971. Let's have zero population growth. Let's actually control the world by controlling population. That in turn creates a dying society. And, it's largely, in my view, a death cult. So I'll just leave it at that. It's a provocative question.
Alrighty, so we're going to go to the next. The next four questions are going to be about Israel and the Jewish lobby here in the United States. So the first question is, what about the problem are politicians seemingly, even DJT, with Israel being prioritized over U.S. interests? What about their control over media, banking, education, and health? They seem to be more of the city's enemy. Okay, and then thank you, Gail, for your question. Then we have, how does Israel play into Trump's efforts to dismantle the centuries-old banking cartel? The U.S. is enacting laws to prohibit criticism of Israel, and Congress is adorned with "I stand with Israel" posters. My concern is that while the old system with London at its core is being dismantled, it might merely be paving the way for a new empire with the U.S. at the helm. Thank you, Jim, for your concern and question. Are either of you familiar with the series The Fall of the Cabal, produced by Janet and Cynthia, that support the Khazar hypothesis of Ashkenazi ancestry and its relation to central banking and the one world government? And if you are, what are your thoughts on this theory? Thank you, CB. And the last one for the set. Is Trump under pressure from the Washington's Jewish oligarchs and lobbies? He surely understands that murdering men and women and children is a crime against God and humanity. Thank you very much, John.
Susan, you want to take a shot at that, or should I start?
You start.
Okay.
You just muted yourself, Barbara.
All right. I think Benjamin Netanyahu has created a new wave of anti-Semitism such as the world has never seen. But I don't think that that basically describes the fundamental dynamic of what's going on in the Middle East right now, or what Trump's attitude is towards this entire mess. First and foremost, you got to understand that what you see in Washington around the so-called Israel lobby is largely a gift to you from none other than George H.W. Bush and the Bush machine within the Republican Party, which is, part and parcel of what everybody knows is not the Trump movement. It's what people call the rhinos, or the old Republican Party of war and Wall Street. Now, essentially what that consists of is, giving Israel its due, if you will, but it also consists of a lot of evangelical Christians who believe in a formation called Christian Zionism. And both of those tendencies are very strong lobbies within the Republican Party and also within the Democratic Party. What Trump did in his first term around the Abraham Accords was really critical to solving the entire problem of the Middle East. He said to the Arabs, number one, we're not going to do terrorism anymore. And he got that commitment from Saudi Arabia and from all of the Gulf Arab countries in the Abraham Accords. We're going to recognize Israel. And that potential was very much on the table until Biden killed the whole deal. So you cannot have peace in the Middle East if you have an entire terrorist operation going on 24/7 essentially saying, we don't recognize Israel and we're out to abolish the Jewish state. That's fundamental issue number one. The second thing, obviously, on the Arab side of the equation is you can't also have, basically throwing the entire Palestinian population out of the area that they actually lived in. This is a religious war, which was set up way back when with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which you can look up in your history books, which carved up the Middle East and essentially designated what was formerly, land which was controlled by then the Palestinians, regardless of how you look at the biblical, area of current Israel. Basically what happened is the Jewish state was created on the basis of taking Palestinian land. And the British Empire ever since has played that particular original arrangement off to create a religious war in the Middle East, which has gone on for generations. For generations. That's what Trump is trying to solve here. And it has everything to do with what the British secret intelligence created when they created what's called revisionist Zionism, which Benjamin Netanyahu is a follower of, Jabotinsky's Zionism. His father was Jabotinsky's secretary. Go look at Jabotinsky, you're going to find a British agent. Similarly, radical Islam, which the United States actually distorted along with their British allies, the Islamic faith to create what they call political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is Hamas, all right, a terrorist operation deliberately set up against Israel. Set up a religious war like that, unless you have a complete intervention from the outside, which Trump was trying to do through the Abraham Accords, on the area to create positive economic development for people, as opposed to war, you're not going to solve the problem. So that's how I'd put it. It's complicated. I share everyone's despair at some of the crazy things which I think are being done, like the censorship being imposed. When you say, I oppose what's going on in terms of this thing from Netanyahu and you're called an anti-Semite, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. And the administration should not be doing that, in my humble opinion. All right. But you're also looking at the 2026 midterms and the very real things which have to be done to mobilize money and everything else in this crazy mixed up Republican Party at this point. And you have to look at the Congress and see how crazy people are in the Congress about this particular issue in the Republican Party. So I will just leave it at that.
I'll just add one other thing quickly. The presumption that there is an Israeli lobby presumes that you have a lobby which is acting on behalf of Israel. Well, tell me which Israel. There have been mass demonstrations against Netanyahu on the streets in Israel. The population is split on how with tremendous opposition to the way Netanyahu and his faction have conducted the genocide in Gaza. There have been reports in the last week or two that the Israeli Defense Forces are very much opposed to Netanyahu's intention to occupy Gaza. So what is the Israeli lobby? It's obviously not something where you just say, oh, it's representing the interests of Israel. No, it's representing the interests of the global financier elite, which, as Barbara has just indicated, is what is really doing it. I mean, when you put together the so-called Jewish lobby here in the United States and the Christian Zionists, as she said, it goes right back to George Bush and it goes right back to the British.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Thank you, Ura. Thanks for the support. Okay, if you're just joining us, my name's Adam Sturman. I'm a producer, webmaster for Promethean Action, joined by Susan Kokinda of Promethean Action and Barbara Boyd of Promethean Pack. We try to do these live question and answer shows every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. This is our third one. If you want to get your question answered, or you want to get our attention, please get our free newsletter. The link's down there. Just search the web for Promethean Action. Okay, we got to pick up the pace here a little bit. We've been going for about 50 minutes so far. Time goes by real fast. Okay, this is, excuse me, let me move to the next one. Okay, this is from a longtime supporter, Pauline. She said, and this is actually from 2 weeks ago, Susan, but I'm sure you remember. Yesterday, or 2 weeks ago, Susan said the US had sold 600 million weapons to Scandinavia and Belgium. Why?
Well,
Susan?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point that Barbara made in terms of what Trump is dealing with in Congress. Would Trump probably prefer to cut off all weapons shipments going into Ukraine? Yes. Does he have the backing in this crazy Senate and Congress to do so? No. So what is the next best thing? He's basically flipping the switch and saying to the Europeans, all right, you want to continue this war? You want to buy weapons from us to continue this war? You do it, not us. But again, I don't think he's in a position, given, I mean, look at the proposal in the Senate, demanding that he intensify sanctions on Russia. There were 70 co-sponsors of that thing. So once you start adding up what he's dealing with, he is a president, he has a certain latitude as president, but this is a constitutional system, and he is stuck with this Congress and has to deal with it, and by the way, until you help us change it.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, let's get to the next one here. Can we trust that the US military is on the side of we the people? And will they eventually be the entity that rounds up the criminals and removes them from their offices of control? Would that include Canada's military and any other countries? Todd. Thank you, Todd.
No, I think that the Justice Department is going to be who rounds up the criminals and prosecutes them, and actually the Trump administration is going to continue to locate them and fire them from any positions of power in the United States. I think what's going on in the military right now is that, basically Trump is using them, from the standpoint of the National Guard to come in and supplement the police to get control of our nation's cities, which right now are a complete mess and are being systematically destroyed. And I think that he's also going to use the military to go after, as he has said, the drug cartels, which is an essential element of stopping the warfare being conducted on our own population through fentanyl and other such devices. So I don't know about the Canadian military and that of other countries joining us. I think basically we're moving away from this crazy system of the NATO alliance. And, hopefully, Trump once asked the question, why do we need it, given that the Soviet Union is no longer in existence? And I think we don't need it. So we're moving towards a system of nation states, and that's great. I think that that's basically how I'd answer the question.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, let's move to the next one here. Okay, this is from Christie. The 1947 National Security Act is an unchecked blanket of secrecy that has allowed for the proliferation of criminal activity and the undermining of U.S. national sovereignty since its inception. Formed in conjunction with the CIA, this deceptively named act shrouded the impact and intent of Project Paperclip's importation of Nazi and fascist scientists into the U.S. in the wake of World War II. The intel agencies have overclassified so many areas. What would be the process of repealing this act? Thank you, Christy, for your question.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two questions there. First is on Project Paperclip. We wouldn't have a space program without Project Paperclip. So I think that there's a lot of things which have been written about that, which, obviously there was a race to get the German expertise in science under control. The Soviets took a lot of those scientists. We took a lot of those scientists in the hopes that they would contribute to our post-war development. Regarding the 1947 National Security Act and the CIA, I think there's a general reform taking place of the intelligence agencies. It's not going as fast as I would like in the CIA. And I think when you're looking at it, Tulsi Gabbard is out there performing the masterwork of actually disclosing the things which are most revealing, like the thing that she just disclosed about Jim Clapper telling everybody to get on board with the fake news of the so-called Russian hack and Trump being a tool of Putin, and saying this is a team effort. We're all on the same team. Don't basically get your disagreements out there. We don't want them. Stop it. We're going to do this. This is our story, as he says in Tulsi's latest document reveal, and we're sticking to it. All right. That is the corruption right there. It's in people. It's in how people actually interpret their mission, and whether they actually cohere with the patriotic mission of the Constitution and the United States, or they don't. There's lots of acts out there which I could say that was bad in this period of history or what have you. But it's, again, not the structure. It's the morality of the people which determines what's going to happen. We need an intelligence agency which actually gives the president an accurate reading on the world. We don't have that at this point in time. And that's because our universities refuse to teach our own history, and they refuse to teach the fundamentals of how you can actually conceptualize and discover the truth. And so that's where I'll leave it. It's a bastardized process which has existed for years. You could argue that the CIA should be completely abolished, but something has to take its place in terms of that fundamental function of being able to give the president an accurate reading of what's going on in the world.
Thank you. All right, this next question is kind of going to be the halfway point. So after we discuss it, we need to pick up the pace a little bit more because we'll be about halfway through the show. Okay, the next question is about our organizing in the United States. Okay, and this is where I think the issue of Promethean PAC is going to come in. Hold on a second. Can your movement have an effect on local election campaigns? I live in New York and believe we have terrible representation from our current governor and some congressional representatives. Additionally, the prospect of Zohran Mamdani winning the New York City mayoral race terrifies many New Yorkers, as well as the rest of the state will no doubt be paying for the political views of the city. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Patricia, for the question.
Let me start by showing something, and then I'm going to have Barbara tell you the function of Promethean PAC. Yes, we can impact local campaigns. This is myself and my husband at a street fair in our local community a couple of weeks ago, using our new half-page flyer, which defines the principles of Donald Trump's Republican Party versus the old party of war and Wall Street. Barbara's going to say a little bit more about the role of our PAC, as opposed to Promethean Action, in a minute. But before we get to that, and we look a little more closely at what's in this half-page flyer, which we want you to go to our website and get copies of and circulate, I want to show you the kind of response we get when you go out there and when you show the flag. These are the two booths at this street fair in a town called Allen Park. It's a big regional street fair. 70,000 people come through it every year. It's a blue-collar, traditionally Democratic area. Now, on the left, you see the Republican Party booth, where we were playing a very prominent role, organizing with this half-page leaflet. And you can see no holds barred. We had our Trump cardboard figure up there and all of our signs. People were totally engaged for 2 days. And then on the right, you see the local Democratic Party booth. And again, this is supposed to be a Democratic stronghold. And they literally put each other to sleep. So that's an example of what everyone on this call, certainly in the United States, could and should be doing with our material. Now, I'm going to put our half-page flyer on the screen. So, and let Barbara describe the role of Promethean PAC and what we're going to be doing in the 2026 elections.
Yeah, basically we're what's called a multi-candidate political action committee, which means we can spend on our own behalf $5,000 in supporting campaigns per campaign. We can also do what's called independent expenditures, which is to use ads and memes and everything else in our toolkit to go after people we don't like and actually explain to people in many respects why they don't like them. For example, Lindsey Graham, you know, who comes up all the time in the comments section. Who is this guy? So, it's surprising to me that nobody actually says that his major contributors are the leading, kind of Z-lobby contributors on behalf of revisionist Zionism in the United States, and, you know, a Ukrainian oligarch who's led the Ukraine war against Russia in everything he's done. That's who his two main contributors are. And that's what's called Oppo. I think we can do it better than anybody else coming into 2026. That's something we're going to be doing. What you're seeing there as the flyer is the fundamental thing we're doing right now, because we find on the ground that people don't really understand Donald Trump's platform or his economic program. They understand sections of it, maybe from Fox News and the daily outrage machine that goes on, but they don't really get the concepts. And unless we get that, out to people, and we have the same type of coalition built up that Trump built up for the presidential election, young people, minorities, trade unionists, the people who the old line Republican Party would like to jettison from the party. And this battle is going on all over the nation right now. They just don't understand the actual nature of what we're talking about here. And that's the key to winning in 2026. So right now, we're conducting a big educational campaign around exactly what is the president's program. Then we're going to get into actually doing campaigns as we move along. We'll be putting up over the course of the next week the present status of the 2026 race. One of our people who you might know, Michael Steger, is running in the 11th Congressional District in Michigan. We also have a candidate that we've endorsed for mayor of Oakland, who's running a very bold campaign. Talk about New York City. Mindy Pechenik is talking about the opposite. How do we actually turn Oakland into something of an economic powerhouse again, as opposed to one of the things that Donald Trump called out recently as being in a complete doom cycle, similar to what is going on with Mondami's campaign in New York City. So we're going to be doing a lot more with the PAC, but the key thing right now is we got a fundamental problem out there of making sure that everybody understands totally what this economic platform is, and that you demand that Republican Party candidates for the midterms actually get on board, endorse it, and show you, I literally show you that they understand it before they get your support. So that's where I'd leave the PAC business right now.
We will be, and we are very active on the ground where we are. We will work with you. So what we're asking you to do is, again, to make clear, the Political Action Committee is a US-based political action committee. Only American citizens can contribute to the Political Action Committee. But what we need you to do is, you see the link up there. Go to the Promethean PAC prom.act midterms. This page will show you what you have to do to get this flyer. What you see on the back here is the new Republican Party. Those are the standards we have to hold our candidates accountable for. The old Republican Party, if you have one of these people, they're called rhinos. Sometimes I call them trinos, Trumpers in name only. This is the standard you need to start holding people to at the local level as you choose your candidates going into 2026. So go to the website, go to the page. It will show you how to order these flyers. What we need you to do is to equip yourself with these flyers and get out there and start organizing.
Yeah, we're looking for people that actually want to take the next steps in having an effective political presence in the United States and in the world. If you go to the link right here, we also have a QR code you can scan. You make a donation, we're going to send you a certain amount. Get them out, any kind of parties you have, get them out at your local organizations, get them out, barbershops, any place where people are talking about what's going on with Trump and the new Republican Party. So this campaign is geared towards people that are looking to take the next steps and are sick of just watching the news media every day, getting your emotions thrashed around by the media producers, because that's what they do. And I think once you start actively politically organizing strangers and talking to strangers and getting into discussions with them, your ideas about what's actually going on in the country will change for the better. So again, small contribution here. We'll send you some of our half-page flyers. Get them out. Okay. I want to take, I think this fits along very well. Carl sent in a super chat. He just wanted to agree with the Detroit thing. I agree. I grew up in the Brightmoor area of Detroit. My dad retired from Fisher Body in '83. At $12 an hour, we had a house, 3 cars, and never wanted for anything. This is what's been lost in the United States, for sure. For sure. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. We're halfway through. It's about 12:06, and I think we just put our minds to it, we can get through the rest. Okay. All right, yes. So you have a 2-part question. Thank you, Abby. It is permitted. First, can you please explain to a lover of Thomas Jefferson how the efforts of Hamilton to create the initial Federal Reserve and central bank concept, both of which Jefferson rallied against, come together for the ultimate good of the Republic? Second, what, if any, thoughts do you all have in regard to the concept of a global currency reset, which many believe is tied to the replacement of a draconian debt slavery system of the Fed being replaced by the quantum financial system? I have credible information that President Trump has invested heavily in the Iraqi dinar, as it is one of the world's currencies, as drastically undervalued, will be reset with the activation of QFS. Well, I don't know exactly what QFS is, but I think we could probably address your first question pretty well.
Yeah, Adam, if you could share the screen. I'm not going to take a lot of time to answer this. This is a class that one of my associates, our premier historian, Robert Ingraham, did a couple of years ago. This is one of a whole series that he did on George Washington, but this one in particular addressed directly what you're talking about. And Adam, I think I shared the link with you.
Yeah, the link for this video is in the description. So if you just go to the YouTube description of the video, you will find, or if you go onto our website of Promethean Action, you can, if you click on the watch button on Promethean Action, you'll see it there in the description. So people can get this longer discussion about Hamilton versus Thomas Jefferson.
And when we post the recording of this, we'll include it so that it's there. But in a nutshell, Alexander Hamilton did not create a central bank. He created the opposite of a central bank. Central banks are run by private interests for the purpose of undermining national sovereignty. Alexander Hamilton created a national bank for the purpose of protecting production and protecting our economic sovereignty. And Andrew Jackson, Jackson later ultimately tore it down. But Jefferson, despite the rewriting of his role in history, leave aside his role with the Declaration of Independence and earlier history. But once you get into the Washington administration, what Bob documents, and he also covers this in his book on George Washington, I'm going to show you where you can find that in a minute, is absolutely the opposite of what everybody has been taught to believe. Now, let me just share one more slide. Because the books that we've referred to in terms of Bob Ingraham, and one of our other colleagues, Brian Lance. These can be found on the toolkit page of Promethean Action. Here's the toolkit tab up here. Scroll down to the bottom. And Bob has written a full book-length discussion of George Washington, which I guarantee is going to completely blow your mind, both from the standpoint of the genius of Washington, his completely joined at the hip relationship with Alexander Hamilton, and the perfidy carried out by Jefferson and Madison against what Washington was trying to do. So you've asked a really important question. As you can see, we could spend an hour talking about it, but I'm just going to point you to those resources.
Thank you, Susan. Barbara, anything to add?
Nope, let's go.
Okay, so this is a question from Kim. Why does Tulsi Gabbard use the term Democratic Republic? 2, who is responsible for the October 7 Holocaust? And why won't Hamas release the hostages to end the war? Thank you, Kim, for your question.
Hamas is responsible for the October 7th Holocaust. And if you ask my views, they were encouraged to do it to prevent the fulfillment of Trump's Abraham Accords, with Saudi Arabia about ready to join them. And they didn't see any new role for them forever in the Middle East had that come about. Why Tulsi uses the term Democratic Republic? I think she's using a fairly precise term. We are a democratic republic, i.e. we have the capacity to vote, but we're also a republic in the sense that we have mechanisms within our government to facilitate the best form of deliberation, provided we actually see those institutions and cure them of their corruption. So that's what I would say for that.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Has anyone researched the origins of this Dutch dynasty, I guess the Dutch East India Company, perhaps as far back as Noah's flood?
Well, I don't know if I would go back as far as Noah's flood, but again, if you go to that toolkit section of our website, get Bob Ingram's book on the Anglo-Dutch imperial system. Yes, we have definitely researched the origins of this.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of Lyndon's most famous writings, he traces back the history of the European landed money families literally back to the time of Christ, and all the crazy financial cults they, like the Oracle of Delphi, all these crazy cults they had. Remember, the Oracle of Delphi was right next to where they were doing all the banking. So yes, you can actually trace back the history of the landed money oligarchy in Europe, because that's how they trace their own histories back that far. Okay, let's get to the next one here. This is a nice comment. I may be mistaken, but I thought I saw you two ladies at President Trump's inauguration. Thank you, Derek. I don't think that was us.
That was not us. Number one, I really didn't want to freeze my ass off. Number two, I was in Washington in 1980 and 84 when Reagan was inaugurated. And unless you have a ringside seat, you're better off watching it on TV, which Barbara and I did.
Susan, you were a Michigan delegate, though, so maybe not the inauguration, but you were at the.
I was at the Republican convention, which was much more dramatic, I think. I mean, the inauguration was amazing, but of course, many of our friends traveled. They took the expense. They took buses and so on. And then because it was sub-zero weather, the whole thing was moved inside, and they had to watch it on a TV screen in a bar. So we weren't there, but thank you for thinking of us.
Thank you. Okay, yes, here's the next one from Christine. Since King Charles and Mr. Putin seem hell-bent on continuing the ungodly war in Ukraine for personal gain, it's rather obvious that they could care less about the lives of someone else's sons who are paying the price for this grandiose stupidity. Why doesn't President Trump ask Charles to insert his son, Prince William, into what has turned out to be another endless and thankless war? Dittos for Putin. If he cares so much about the bloody war, let him be the one to put one or two of his kids on the front line. Let's see how quickly both shrink in response. Thank you, Christine, for your comment. Would you ladies like to make any comment?
Uh, not really. I think it understates the causes of the war from the standpoint of why Russia felt the need to actually intervene on behalf of the people of the Donbass who were being slaughtered. And so that's the only caveat I would add to that. People are pretty famous among the warmongers, King Charles and others among them, for being what somebody once called chicken hawks, i.e., your sons and daughters go to my wars and perform for me. Like hell, I'm never going to put one of my kids in there. And that's pretty much true. So that's how I comment.
Susan?
I think she said it.
Thank you, Bitcoin Ben Show. Thank you very much for your generous contribution. Maybe you want to have one of us on your show. I'm not familiar with it, but I'm definitely going to be checking it out after this. So thank you very much for your generous contribution. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Ms. Lim. Can someone from PA lead a book club online? I replied to you in the chat with my email address. If you can just email me and just remind me, I will try and put you in touch with somebody who may be able to do something in Pennsylvania. But I'd like to thank Bitcoin Pen Show again very much for your generous contribution. Maybe afterwards, try and get in contact with us, and we'd be happy to be on your show if you'd like to have us as guests. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next one here. What other countries would be helpful in defeating the British Empire? What do you think the chances of success are? Thank you very much, Paul, for your support.
Well, I think you can see it in action tomorrow in Alaska. So much effort has been put, not just since Trump, but literally going back to the 19th century to keep the United States and Russia at each other's throats. One piece of history which is becoming slightly more common knowledge is that Russia was on the side of the North in the Civil War and protected our harbors from not only Confederate but British problems. What Lyndon LaRouche always stressed is, especially in the 21st century, the combination of forces that you need to put together to crush this global financier elite is the United States, Russia, which hopefully we will see progress in tomorrow, India, and China. That is the combination. Obviously, other countries can and will participate, but you look at those four countries in terms of their tradition, in terms of their economic resources, in terms of their military capabilities, and so on. That is the combination which is needed to pull the plug on the current globalist financier system, and that's where it has to start.
Okay, next one. Is President Trump choosing between the devil we know, the UK, and the one that we don't, Russia? Thank you, Jim.
Well, I think I just answered that. We know both of them. We know the British and we know Russia. Now, Russia, is one of those countries which, as I said, sometimes they have been taken over by the imperial disease. Obviously, we saw the long history of communism, but if you want to find out where that comes from, there's a very good book out there by Richard Poe, which is entitled How the British Created Communism and Blamed the Jews. So we actually do know what's going on there. And I think, as I answered earlier, Russia is potentially a partner as a sovereign republic, a sovereign, now anti-imperial republic in the mission of crushing the British Empire.
Thank you. Okay, here's a general one. Does President Trump agree with your opinions? Thank you, Thomas.
I don't know how much, but I think we probably, spend a whole lot of time looking at what he's saying and agreeing with it and trying to reinforce it in everything we're saying to the population as to what we think the key parts of those things actually are. So I suspect that, that agreement is there because we try our very best to create it and to lead him in a direction, if possible, that we think his policies actually represent. Susan may want to add to that.
Again, it is what Barbara said. We've made it our mission to try and communicate to the population what Donald Trump is doing. So whether we do it in the words that he does it, whether he would do it in our words, nobody knows. But we're trying to communicate what Trump said. He wants a world of sovereign nations where people have the right and the ability to actually develop their people and their populations. That was a speech he gave in Asia, I believe, during his first term, a really beautiful speech. He gave a similar one at the United Nations. That's what he wants to do. That's what we want to do. That's where we converge.
Thank you, Susan. Just a quick recap. If you're joining us live, my name's Adam. This is Barbara. Susan's above. We're with Promethean Action, Promethean PAC. We do a live Q&A show every Thursday. If you really want to get your question answered, make sure you are subscribed to our free newsletter. Our email newsletters throughout the week will contain the link to get the questions in. So please subscribe if you want to ask a question. Okay. Aside from the poisoned education system raising socialist and communist values for the last 40 years, how can we think our President Trump can ever finally be successful if the media is still allowed to blatantly lie 24/7 and brainwash society? And why doesn't the president bring back the Smith-Mundt Act? He refers to fake news, but never talks about putting a stop to it. Thank you, Elliot.
I think you're seeing that he's putting a stop to it right now. The recent revelations which came out this week are underlining and pointing to the relationship between the intelligence agencies and the news media. And that existed, quite frankly, long before Smith-Mundt. What Smith-Mundt actually says is the State Department, which was actually doing propaganda to foreign nations, can't actually turn that same propaganda hose from the State Department onto the American people. And Obama, basically, there's a lot of stories out about how Obama took that out of existence, which is true. But that is not really saying what the relationship is. You need to basically dig within the intelligence community to expose every single damn one of their contacts. I'll give you an example. In 1975, 74, a guy by the name of Stephen Rosenfeld, who was a CIA plant on the Washington Post, wrote an op-ed which said, Lyndon LaRouche, the media is giving him positive coverage. Stop it. You basically have to not cover him at all or defame him. That was marching orders from the CIA to the Post, and they did it. And the media fell in line around that. That existence was supposed to have been overcome with the Church Committee and the exposures of what was called Operation Mockingbird. But you've got to go a little bit further back, and Trump is right now exposing the whole damn thing. And on top of it, they're all going bankrupt. So, I think we're getting to the point where we're actually reviving free speech in this country and shutting down the propaganda apparatus, which is key.
Thank you. Susan, you want to say anything?
Nope, that'll do it.
All right, I just want to hit a few super chats here before we finish. God bless America. I made 2 comments. Can you read them and reply? The subject really bothers me. I'm sorry, God bless. I scrolled. First off, it's very hard to be in the show and moderate the chat, but I did scroll through and I tried to find your question and I couldn't do it. Maybe you left it earlier in the chat. If you, like I said, if you subscribe to our newsletter and you get the official form, we will read your question. So consider doing that. And thank you again. I love and appreciate what you people are doing from the same person. Again, thank you. God bless America. We have 2 from Adai. Thanks. Thank you very much for your support there. And finally, one from Jazz Cat. I'll put up here real quick. Susan and Barbara, do you ladies have dinar? You both should know what is coming with gold and silver. All right. Thank you, Jess. We will look into that. Thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate it. Okay, but let's continue on with our question and answers here. Is President Trump planning to end the income tax and the central bank? Probably the Fed, right? Thank you, Louis.
Well, what I would say is I certainly think that he sees that as the desirable outcome of his reshaping, of his returning our economy to actual American principles. He's been specific on the income tax. You know, he says that he's pointed to the fact that we didn't need an income tax as long as we were carrying out a successful tariff policy under William McKinley. He's referred to that on many, many occasions. So he certainly implied that as his tariff policy becomes permanent, continues to bring in revenues and so on, he certainly has implied he'd like to get rid of the income tax. The question of the Federal Reserve we have addressed. This is not something where you just turn off the switch. It's a political question. Congress would actually have to repeal the Federal Reserve Act. And I think we're a long way from having the political support within Congress to actually do that. But what I think Trump and Bessent and Navarro and Lutnick and JD are all doing is they're drawing the American population into the most public discussion of the Federal Reserve and how it's been acting in a very negative way to begin to lay the basis for people recognizing this is not, I mean, as people who've studied this know, it's not federal. It's a private system. People are discovering this for the first time because of the way Trump is drawing this, is carrying out this confrontation with the Fed. What Trump will be in a position to do is to change the composition of the Fed in this term of his. He's obviously appointed Stephen Moran as the temporary board of governors, and he's obviously going to have the opportunity to appoint a new chairman come May of this coming year. So again, we've described it as a dual power situation. He wants to get the Fed, for the moment, more in sync with what he's doing. At the same time, he's setting up other investment structures, various kinds of development banks, using various kinds of government entities that already exist to do what a national bank would do, i.e. pump credit into the actual productive economy, not to mention bringing in trillions of dollars of investment from other countries and other private countries. So again, I think that's what Trump sees at the end of this process. Is it possible for him to do that in this term? I frankly don't think so, because I think it's going to be a longer process to unravel it and to replace it. But I think that's definitely the direction he wants to go in.
Thank you, Susan. And I think this next one is kind of related to the transformation of the Fed. And I edited this one, but I think I kept your intention, Jeff. Should every citizen further the demise of the Fed and prepare for the post-Fed era by buying bullion gold? This looks like a great idea to me. Repositories where citizens' own bullion can be secured and tied to an electronic transaction processing through, for example, a debit card. I'd prefer if they were privately owned. What do you think, Jeff?
Barbara, you can have this one.
I think we've got to basically first get to the step of some type of stable international financial system based again on something like the gold reserve standard before we start talking about doing such a thing with the Fed. We have to have a basis to stop the crazy free float of currencies, and we have to think through what do we want this actual new Bretton Woods, if you will, kind of arrangement to look like. It certainly isn't the BRICS, and right now the Fed is privately owned, and that's something that people don't really realize at all. Yes, there is the Federal Reserve Act, but in reality, the New York Fed, i.e. the Wall Street banks, really runs Fed policy. So there's quite a few steps to go here. And a lot of people are gold bugs for the reason that they want to find some stability in currency, which is the right motivation. But it's a question of actually first getting our own economy into shape and then proceeding to actually, use our trade relationships with the four powers, which Susan mentioned, to bring about the end of the British financial empire and some type of system which is totally based on developing the world's economies. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Thank you. Okay, so we're almost done. We're coming into the last 10 questions. I think we can totally blow through them. Some podcasters have said Pam Bondi is slow walking the indictments. Do you believe she is, or is this all part of President Trump's great weave to get all the pieces in place before he wraps up everything in one big, beautiful blow? Also, in your opinion, are there any bad actors in his administration still currently? If so, who and why do you think this? Thank you for your hard work. Thank you, Oopsie Farm. Thank you.
To bring an indictment, the first one that you bring, it's like the story that, first person through the door gets shot. You got to win the first indictment. You've got to figure out the venue and jurisdiction and where you're going to bring it. And you got to win. You can't bring it in DC, obviously, because the court system is completely corrupt, but that's where natural venue and jurisdiction would lie. So it's basically the case is being constructed right now, and there's several cases against several different people. Will it all be one great big grand conspiracy case? I personally have been involved in a lot of criminal cases, and I think that would be very hard to try in one big blow. I think it's much easier to look at it as 4 or 5 conspiracy cases, all structured around the fact that you're bringing a conspiracy probably in Florida, which is where it's rumored to be taking place. Tulsi Gabbard is telling you outright that there are bad actors still within the intelligence community. She's saying that every time she goes on TV, these people are trying to block what it is we're revealing. That is true. You're talking about overturning, think about it, 1971 forward, take that as your scope. You're talking about corrupt institutions which have been running this country for decades and are invested in them. You've got to figure out who's good, who's bad, and go into these agencies with, on the one hand, kind of a chainsaw, but a very deliberate one. And you've got to be able to say, what do I actually want to have happen in many of these agencies? We're not just going to blow them away. We need something like the FBI to handle federal crimes. Think about just letting California or one of these other places to go off on their own without a federal government, and you'll see essentially what I'm talking about. So this is a moving, dynamic process, and I realize that people want to just see people in handcuffs. Let's lead them off, all right? But then what happens? You got to put them in jail, and we have a basis for doing that, but it requires putting together a case, which is not easier said than done in many of these circumstances. After all, the coup was run by lawyers. Realize that the whole thing was one vast conspiracy of lawyers, all right, who were thinking through all the time, how do I get away with this under current law? So I point that out. I think it's happening. I think it's very clear that it's happening if you see the disclosures, and I think it requires just a little bit of patience, and you've got to come in and support Tulsi and support her, steadfastly against some of the people. The largest amount of opposition comes through the intelligence community's connections in the media and in the Congress, primarily in the Senate Intelligence Committee. So that's where I'd leave my analysis. I'll be writing more about this over the coming weeks.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, we're going to move on to 31. Yes. Do you think Zelensky will flee Ukraine, or will he get bailed out again? Thank you, Pamela.
can't predict history that much. You know, he's largely a captive of the oligarchs and Nazis who run the country. So how they will all deal with events after tomorrow, I can't predict. We'll just have to see.
Any comments, Susan?
No, I think making forecasts in terms of that situation prior to the Trump-Putin summit is not going to get you very far.
Okay. So I'm going to take 30. I'm going to take the next two questions together. Okay, here's the first one. Since the deep state's actions led U.S. production to move overseas, which China benefited from, is there a direct collusion between the deep state and China? Okay, and here's another one. Gordon Chang has been quoted and interviewed as an expert on China, stating that Xi's forward vision is being impacted by demographics, aging population, economic, poorly run economy with investment in non-performing sectors like real estate, politics, a militaristic CCP pushing his agenda, failed international initiatives, etc., suggesting failure as a leader impacting the future of China. Are his readings of the tea leaves correct? And as a result, is there a possibility that Russia can be pulled into the West camp by Trump?
Sure, there's a connection between the deep state and China. After all, since the deep state is largely composed of the same multinational banking and corporate interests who moved all of our production overseas, you start to see the connection right there. And, you know, when you think about the firm alliance within the BRICS, around climate change, around all of the policies of the World Economic Forum, etc., you see the hand of the deep state right there. As to Gordon Chang, you know, he's Fox News's expert. You know, I really think he's full of it on many accounts. He's predicted the complete collapse of China about 58 times. Every time he's been absolutely wrong. The things he cites, however, are all things which will and are dramatically influencing the development of China's economics. Like us, you know, they're basically in a form of demographic collapse. That's something which you can't continue with. You've got to have, as we started, you know, population growth. The economy is, you know, as we've emphasized over and over and over again, unbalanced, and Bessent keeps saying that. And, you know, basically, you know, there's lots of tea leaves going on about Xi Jinping's future, which I have no way of assessing, since most of the stuff that comes to us comes through the CIA, which has uniformly failed to accurately assess the trajectory of either of these two nations for the last 50 years. So, you know, that's how I'd answer the question. I think what Trump is looking at is, how do I turn my relationship with Xi into a positive relationship for the United States? And what you're dealing with there is a different view of how relationships between nation states should happen, rather than the globalist view, which most certainly Gordon Chang endorses and we've lived with for the last 50 years.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is about crypto. I'll ask it anyway, but I think it's going to be really hard. We've already kind of answered it in relation to gold, but I'll just quickly go through this. Trump signed Executive Order 41478. The federal government can support the development of foundational infrastructure to help digital asset technologies achieve their full potential. Okay, this includes position in blockchain not as a niche thing, but as critical infrastructure. Do we have anything to say against Trump and his relationship to cryptocurrency? Because Trump definitely has made some rulings on it and about blockchain over the past few months.
I don't have anything to say about it because, frankly, I don't understand it well enough to comment. So, you know, I don't really try and get out there when I don't understand something. I just try and study it and see if I can come to an understanding.
You know, it's actually, I've always had a hard time understanding like what uses you could do for the blockchain, but one thing came up very recently. I thought was interesting. As all of these videos become AI generated and a deep fake issue becomes, and I have to thank Gary Vee for this, as the AI generated videos become a bigger deal, it's getting harder and harder to tell what's real and fake. So one of the uses of a public blockchain public ledger might be where it could be kind of a way to prove that a video is authentic, right? You could make a signature, say if this signature is, if the video has a signature, it's on the public ledger, then that's a real video. That could be also a really big value other than just as a store of digital currency like it is now. Okay, next question here, and we're literally 4 away. Can you say something about the globalist situation in Norway, please? Thanks, Oyvind. I honestly, I just don't know what's going on there.
Adam, can you share the screen? I just did this. It's a quick little royal family lineage map going back to, I believe, Queen Victoria right here, between the British royal family, the Swedish royal family, because that Sweden came up earlier, and the Norwegian royal family. So, you know, yes, it is part of the European noble families network. You know, I saw this question in advance, and what I would just say in terms of the political situation there, where I'm operating off of just a quick search, and if you're in Norway, perhaps you want to be in closer touch with us to help us get a better sense of what is going on there. But Norway is certainly checking off all the 2 key boxes in terms of the globalist agenda, which is total support for the war in Ukraine and total buy-in on the CO2 hoax and the decarbonization of their economy. So I'd say they're pretty locked and loaded at this point, but we would love to be in touch with people in Norway and in other countries to help us fill out our picture on the ground of what is going on. So thank you for that question.
All right, great. Number 37 here. Has an increase in anti-Semitism amplified by mainstream Western media outlets serve to advance the interests of the British Empire and or globalist agenda? If so, how? Who benefits from the resurgence of anti-Semitic tropes and false narratives that have fueled violent acts against Jewish people and arson attacks in synagogue, disturbingly reminiscent of Europe in the 1930s and 40s? President Trump is working to combat anti-Semitism in the US, while most leaders of Europe, Canada, and Australia are providing some lip service with little action. I'm curious if this is another example of President Trump's once again upsetting the apple cart of the empire, or if it's coincidental. Thank you for all the work you do. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, David, for your question.
Well, as I said before, you know, there is a real and awful resurgence of anti-Semitism occurring because of the actions, in my view, of Benjamin Netanyahu. And, you know, what is actually going on in the Middle East at this point in time. And there's, you know, you can't deny that it's happening out there when you see some of the you know, rabbit holes people are going down, you know, on the internet and elsewhere. Combating it, on the other hand, involves really not sort of banning speech, which seems to be the tendency in some respects here in the United States. It's to actually, you know, locate historically what the real issues in this battle are. They're not, you know, Jew versus Gentile or any of those types of tropes. You know, it is the British Empire and its policy of permanent religious warfare, which is feeding this awful dynamic on both sides of the equation, I might add. There's also a huge resurgence of anti-Muslim idiocy going on, similar to what happened around September 11, 2001. So, you know, to the extent that you put both feet and choose religious sides here, you're making a huge mistake, which can only end very badly for the world. I strongly suggest that if you're an intellectual and you want to approach this right, you go back and read Friedrich Schiller's History of the 30 Years' War, and you'll get a real sense of how this operates.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay. Next one. Do you know about what do you know about Britain's involvement in a genocide against the people of Biafra that took over 6 million lives and still counting? Hundreds of Biafrans were killed, persecuted, and imprisoned by the Nigerian government just for supporting Trump during his first and second term. I personally don't know the specifics of this. Do you think President Trump will ever speak about Biafra, even when the Biafran Americans has contributed to his success? Thank you, Mazi. Do you ladies know anything?
I do. You know, everything that the Mazi is saying is true. This was a horrible war in which a tribe in Nigeria actually seceded from Nigeria, you know, the Biafrans so-called. And because British Petroleum and Shell wanted the oil in the secessionist colony, they basically sponsored one of these little awful genocidal wars, which killed 6 million people with full British imperial support in Biafra. And do I think President Trump will ever speak about this? I hope so. You know, because it's yet another one of these wars like Azerbaijan and Armenia, like all of the conflicts he's been solving all over the world, which still has a resonance. After all, you don't kill 6 million people without setting out something of a permanent warfare dynamic that needs to be solved through economic development and without the participation, if you will, of British multinational companies. So that's how I'd answer that.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, one last recap here. I'm gonna read the last two questions together because they both come from the asking about UK related stuff. But it's a fast final roundup here. If you're joining us now, my name is Adam Sturman. I'm joined with Barbara Boyd and Susan Kokinda from Promethean PAC and Promethean Action. We do a live Q&A show every Thursday at about this time. If you want to get reminders and get the rest of our content, please subscribe to our free newsletter and you'll get notifications of when we go live next. And we do 3 political updates a week. So we're going to move into our last question here before we close this week's show here. Okay. I always believed that COVID was about 2 things on both sides of the pond: to destroy Trump's economy before the upcoming election year and to make sure the UK economy did not show benefits from Brexit. The swamp is literally that evil. Thank you, Bert. And the last one also from UK. As a British subject, it gives me a real sense of empowerment to know that there are folk like Barbara and Susan drilling down into the duplicity exercised by these governments who stubbornly follow the Bretton Woods monetary system, the illegitimate child of the Anglo-Dutch agreement in the 15th century. As someone who greatly admires what President Donald Trump is doing to push back at and hopefully bring down that colonial mindset of the financial oligarchs, I'm concerned to find that here in the UK, we have no one addressing this fundamental issue. My question is, how do we proceed here in the UK in order to support the President Trump efforts or to initiate our own? Thank you very much, UK patriots. We hear you. Barbara, Susan?
Well, you know, basically, you've got the right tack. So the question is, how do you organize around it? You know, and I think there are people in the UK, in certain tendencies within the Reform Party, and the people who actually conducted Brexit, who are kind of onto the same issue. And you got to explore and hook up with them and make sure they're on the right track in terms of principles, which is really the key issue we've been saying over and over and over again. It's not the names so much, it's the principles which are important. And if you take a look at the flyer that we introduced here in the United States around Donald Trump's platform, I think something very similar could be introduced in the UK as the driver for a wholesale dethronement of the City of London. As for COVID, the motivation for that, is, really something which I think we're going to begin to find out about, since it's now being mooted that Anthony Fauci is one of the people who's going to be facing prosecution by the Justice Department at this point in terms of where COVID came from and how it was handled here. And yes, it played a primary role in the rigging of the 2020 election and the coup here in the United States. So that's how I'd answer it. I have to just take a brief break and answer my door, but I'll be right.
Yeah, well, we're about to end. Thank you very much, Barbara. Susan, would you like to say anything here?
No, I think Barbara covered it.
All right.
I do want to mention that it looks like since we've had this show, we've had numbers of people from around the United States who have donated in order to get copies of the flyer. So thank you. I see North Carolina, Michigan, and I believe Texas so far.
Yeah, actually, that's the most important thing you can do for us. If you're in the United States, let's say you're already getting our newsletter and you want to take your political activity to the next level, go to the link right there, get the leaflet. We have a black and white version. We understand a lot of people are constrained with their funds. That's fine. We have a black and white version you can print and give to people. But I think that's ultimately one of the takeaways we wanted to give people, is that, if we're gonna ensure that this MAGA revolution stays in the United States over the next decades, you and I together, we're going to have to organize for it and not just sit and watch news media all day. Barbara, any final words before we close the show?
Well, in the words of a famous person in the history of the United States, don't ever mourn, go out and organize. And I think that that's really what we got to do here. And we have a big challenge in terms of keeping this revolution going in 2026, because what the enemy is going to try and do is bring in a Congress which will revolt from this agenda in 2026. And we can't sit back and basically look at the trends and say the Democratic Party is crazy and they're not going to get any votes with their policies. We've got to make sure that that victory actually happens in terms of a Congress which is much more susceptible to complete agreement with Donald Trump's platform. So that's where I'll leave it.
Susan, quick thing. I'm a voter in Michigan and an election inspector in my town. What else can I do?
Get directly in touch with us.
Okay.
We do organizing in Michigan. In fact, tonight, we do a Zoom with activists in Michigan. So if you're in touch with us directly today, I'll make sure you get the information about that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. Susan, I just dropped your Prompack email in a chat to him.
Great.
I want to give him a chance to hopefully get that. But okay, everyone, I'd like to thank everyone who came on for our show today. Thank you very much for the support. We're going to be doing this next Thursday. If you want to get reminded about next Thursday and get all the other stuff that we're publishing, please subscribe to our free newsletter that is in the description of this video. And thank you very much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.